English Daily 15 Minutes.
John started his new life in London on a rainy Tuesday. He carried 2 big suitcases and a small backpack into his new apartment. The apartment was very small and located on the 3rd floor of an old building. In the main room, there was only a bed, a small wooden wardrobe, a table, and 1 chair. The kitchen was in the corner, and it had a small fridge and a cooker. John looked out of the window and saw the busy street below. Cars moved slowly, and people walked fast under their red and blue umbrellas. London was a very big and very expensive city. John felt excited, but he also felt quite lonely. Every morning he woke up at 6 o'clock and walked to the train station. He worked in a large office in the center of the city. He liked his job, but his rent was very high. At the end of his first month, John looked at his money and realized he had a problem. He needed help to pay for the apartment. He sat at his table, opened his computer, and wrote a short message on a website. The message said, "Roommate wanted. A small room in a quiet apartment. Please write to me." He saved the message and waited. John checked his computer every hour after work. He was nervous because the next month's rent was coming very soon. He thought about his life in his hometown. In his hometown, he had many friends and a big family. Here in London, he only had his computer, his desk, and his small bed. The city was beautiful, but it was also difficult for a young man alone. On Wednesday evening, he walked around his neighborhood. He saw beautiful parks, big grocery stores, and expensive cafes. He wanted to sit in a cafe and drink a warm cup of coffee, but he looked at his wallet and decided to walk back home. He made a simple bowl of pasta in his tiny kitchen. While he was eating his dinner, his computer made a sharp sound. It was an email notification. John opened the email quickly. A person named Max wanted to see the room. Max wrote that he was an artist and needed a quiet place to live. John felt a wave of relief. He immediately wrote back and gave his address. They agreed to meet the next evening at 7 o'clock. John cleaned the apartment carefully. He washed the dishes, wiped the small table, and opened the window to let the fresh air inside. He wanted the apartment to look perfect. The next evening at exactly 7 o'clock, John heard a knock on the door. He opened it and saw the new roommate. His name was Max. Max was a tall young man with short brown hair and a quiet smile. He wore a simple green t-shirt and blue jeans. He carried 1 large black box and a backpack. Max walked into the apartment and looked around the small room. He looked at the bed, the window, and the wardrobe. Then, he looked at John and gave a soft nod. Max took his box into the small bedroom and closed the door without saying a word. John stood in the kitchen and felt a little surprised. Max did not speak at all. He did not ask any questions about the house or about the keys. He simply went into his room. An hour later, John heard Max moving his things inside the room. John sat on his own bed and thought about his new situation. He liked the quietness, but he also wondered about this mysterious person. He wondered why Max did not talk. Was he shy? Was he tired from his long journey? John decided not to worry because Max looked like a kind person. The first week with Max was very interesting. John did not see Max very much during the day. John left the house at 7 in the morning. At that time, Max's door was always closed. When John came back from his office at 6 in the evening, Max's door was still closed. John sometimes heard soft music coming from the room, but there was no other sound. John felt like he lived alone, but he knew another person was there. One day, John saw Max's shoes near the front door. They were covered in yellow and blue paint. John realized that Max really was an artist. John looked at his online bank account and saw that Max paid his half of the rent exactly on time. This made John very happy. He could now pay for the apartment without any stress. He bought some extra milk and bread from the market to share with Max. He put them on the kitchen table with a small note that said, "Welcome." The next day, the milk and bread were gone, and the note had a small drawing of a smiley face on it. John smiled and kept the drawing on his desk. Days passed quickly, and John began to notice Max's very strange habits. Max was a very quiet person during the day, but he became active at night. Every night around midnight, John woke up because he heard soft noises in the kitchen. John walked out of his room very quietly and looked. He saw Max cooking beautiful meals. Max chopped vegetables quickly, boiled pasta, and baked bread in the oven. The kitchen always smelled wonderful late at night. Sometimes Max did not cook. Instead, he carried a large canvas and brushes into the small living area. He stood in front of the window under the moonlight and painted for hours. He used bright colors like yellow, red, and blue. John watched him from the dark hallway. Max painted beautiful trees, oceans, and mountains. Every morning when John woke up at 7 o'clock, Max was already asleep in his room. But on the kitchen table, John always found a fresh piece of cake or a beautiful new painting drying near the window. John smiled every morning before work because the apartment felt alive and warm. John started to look forward to these midnight moments. Sometimes when he could not sleep, he sat quietly in the dark hallway just to watch Max paint. Max moved his brush with so much energy. He looked completely different when he painted. During the day, he was shy and quiet, but at night, with a brush in his hand, he looked strong and confident. John learned many things about Max just by watching him. He saw that Max used dark colors like gray and black when it rained outside. When the weather was warm and sunny, Max used bright colors like orange and yellow. It was like Max's paintings were his words. John did not need to talk to him to understand how he felt. One morning, John found a painting of a beautiful sunrise on the table. It was so bright and full of hope. John took it to his office and put it on his desk. His colleagues at work looked at the painting and praised it. They asked John who painted it, and John proudly told them that his roommate was a very talented artist. By the third week, John felt very comfortable with this routine. He no longer felt lonely when he walked home from the train station. He knew that even if the apartment was quiet, it was full of creativity and warmth. He started to buy different kinds of food from the international market near his office. He bought spices, special cheeses, and fresh fruits. He left them in the kitchen for Max. Every night, Max used these new ingredients to make incredible dinners. John always found a plate covered with a clean towel on the counter. The food was often warm, and it tasted like it came from a 5-star restaurant. John gained some weight because Max's food was so delicious. He did not mind at all. He felt happy that he could support Max's art by buying food, and Max supported him by making dinner. They had a perfect system, a silent agreement between two strangers in a giant city. One Friday afternoon, John finished work early and walked home. The weather was unusually hot for London, and John was tired. When he opened the apartment door, he immediately smelled something burning. A thick, gray smoke came out of the kitchen. John panicked and ran inside. Max was there, but the kitchen was in total chaos. There was blue and yellow paint all over the floor, on the table, and even on the walls. A large pot on the cooker was burning because Max forgot about it while painting a huge picture of a forest. John quickly turned off the cooker and opened all the windows. The cold London air came inside and cleared the smoke. John looked at the dirty floor and felt quite angry. He took a mop and a bucket of water. Max looked at John with big, sad eyes. Max looked very sorry about the mess. Without a word, Max took a cloth and sat on the floor. He began to clean the blue paint. John cleaned the kitchen counter, and Max washed the floor. They worked together for 1 hour in total silence. Soon, the kitchen was clean again, and the smoke was gone. Max looked at John and smiled shyly, and John realized his anger was completely gone. After the big mess was cleaned, John sat on the chair and took a deep breath. He looked at Max, who was still holding the dirty cloth. Max looked tired, and his hands were stained with black and blue ink. John realized that Max did not mean to cause trouble. He was just so focused on his art that he forgot about the world around him. John took the cloth from Max's hand, went to the bathroom, and brought a warm, wet towel. He gave it to Max so he could clean his hands. Max took the towel and gave John a very grateful look. That night, there was no cooking and no painting. The house was completely still. John went to bed early, but he could not sleep for a long time. He thought about how they managed to solve a difficult problem without saying a single word. It was amazing to him. In the past, when he had problems with friends, they argued and shouted for hours. With Max, there was only silence, cooperation, and understanding. The next morning was Saturday. John did not have to go to work. He woke up at 8 o'clock and walked into the kitchen. He expected to see the usual mess or a new painting, but the kitchen was completely empty and perfectly clean. Max's bedroom door was open. John walked over and looked inside. The room was empty too. Max was not there. John felt a sudden cold feeling in his chest. Did Max leave the apartment permanently because of yesterday's incident? Did he think John was too angry? John walked around the living room and felt a deep sadness. He realized that he really liked having Max around. The silence of the apartment now felt cold and empty, not peaceful like before. He looked at the empty walls and missed the bright colors of Max's canvases. He sat at the table and regretted his anger from the previous day. He wished he could tell Max that everything was fine and that he wanted him to stay. John decided to go outside to clear his head. He walked to the local park. The park was full of families, children playing football, and people walking their dogs. John sat on a wooden bench under a large oak tree. He watched the clouds move across the sky. He thought about his future in London. If Max did not come back, he had to find another roommate, and that thought made him feel exhausted. He did not want a normal roommate who talked all the time about boring things. He liked his silent life with the mysterious artist. After 2 hours, John stood up and walked back to the apartment building. He climbed the stairs slowly, his heart beating fast. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. He immediately smelled the sweet scent of vanilla and warm sugar. He looked at the kitchen table. Max was sitting there. Next to him was a large bakery box full of fresh pastries and 2 cups of hot coffee. Max looked up at John and smiled warmly. John let out a big breath and smiled back. Max was not gone. He went out early just to buy breakfast for them as a thank you. After that day, their silent life became very comfortable. John understood Max without any words. John knew that Max loved painting when he was happy, and he cooked when he missed his old home. They created a nice routine together. Every Saturday morning, John went to the local market and bought fresh vegetables, eggs, and flour for Max. He left the bags on the kitchen table. In the evenings, John came home from his busy office and always found a hot plate of delicious food waiting for him. One evening, John took one of Max's beautiful mountain paintings and hung it on the main wall of the living room. Max came out of his room, saw the painting on the wall, and his eyes became very bright. He walked to the table and put a fresh cup of tea in front of John. John drank his tea and looked at the art. He realized that he did not feel lonely in London anymore. He had a great friend, a beautiful home, and a happy life, all without saying a single word. Months passed and the winter arrived in London. The days became very short, and the nights were long and freezing. The small apartment was sometimes cold, so John bought a large electric heater for the living room. Max liked the warmth of the heater and often brought his art tools into the living room during the day. One afternoon, a very strong winter storm started. The wind blew loudly against the glass windows, and heavy rain hit the building. John was at home because it was Sunday. He sat on the sofa and read a book about computer programming. Max sat at the big table and worked on a new collection of paintings. He worked very hard for 4 hours. John looked at Max from time to time. He saw that Max was very serious. This was an important project for him. Max finished his last painting just as the rain stopped. He turned the canvas toward John. It was a painting of London under a blanket of white snow. It looked cold, but very beautiful. John gave a big thumbs up to Max. Max smiled and went to the kitchen to make some black coffee. They drank their coffee and looked at the storm through the window. In February, the weather started to change. The days became longer and the sun appeared more often. One Monday morning, a man in a professional suit came to the apartment building. John was just leaving for work when he saw this man talking to the building manager. Later that evening, John found a large white envelope on the kitchen table. It was from a famous art gallery in London. The gallery manager saw some of Max's drawings online and wanted to see his paintings in person. John felt incredibly excited for Max. He looked at Max and pointed at the letter with a big smile. Max nodded his head and looked very happy too. The next week was very busy. Max needed to prepare 10 large paintings for the gallery exhibition. The small apartment became an art studio. There were canvases, brushes, paint bottles, and wooden frames everywhere. John decided to help Max with the preparation. After his office hours, John helped Max carry the heavy wooden frames. He helped wrap the finished paintings in protective plastic. They worked together every night until 11 o'clock. They did not say anything, but they worked like a real team. Finally, the big day arrived in March. The art gallery was located in a very fashionable part of Central City. John put on his best suit and a nice tie. He took the train to the gallery after work. When he arrived, he was surprised to see so many people inside. There were lights, cameras, and many elegant guests walking around. All of Max's 10 paintings were hanging on the big white walls. People stood in front of the paintings and talked about the beautiful colors and the unique style. John walked through the crowd and looked for Max. He saw Max standing near the entrance. Max wore a nice jacket, but he looked a bit nervous because of all the attention. John walked over and stood next to him. He put a hand on Max's shoulder to show his support. Max looked at John, and his nervous expression disappeared. He gave his familiar, quiet smile. John then walked to the main wall of the gallery. In the center, there was a very large painting that John did not see before. He looked at it closely and gasped. The painting showed a small, messy kitchen. There was blue and yellow paint on the floor and gray smoke near the ceiling. In the middle of the painting, 2 young men were working together to clean the floor. One man had a mop, and the other had a cleaning cloth. It was a painting of their big kitchen incident from a few months ago. Under the painting, there was a small card with the title of the artwork. The title was Silent Friendship. John looked at the painting for a long time. He felt a deep sense of pride and happiness. A well-dressed man walked up to John and looked at the same painting. The man said that the painting was beautiful because it showed a true story of cooperation and real life. John nodded his head in agreement, but did not say a word. He just smiled. The exhibition was a huge success. Max sold 5 paintings that evening, and the gallery manager wanted to work with him for another year. Late at night, John and Max took a taxi back to their small apartment. The city lights passed by the window. When they opened the door of their home, the apartment felt different. It was no longer just a cheap place to sleep. It was a place where 2 different people built a great life together. Max walked to his room and brought out a small canvas. He gave it to John. It was a smaller copy of the Silent Friendship painting. John took it carefully and hung it directly over his desk. He looked at his new home, his successful friend, and his future in London. He felt completely happy and content. He realized that a great friendship did not need long conversations or loud words. It only needed respect, help, and a silent understanding between 2 good people. John turned off the lights and went to sleep, ready for a new day in his perfect home.